May all beings be happy. May all beings be healthy. May all beings be free from harm. May all beings love life. May all beings awaken. Welcome to another Cuke Audio podcast. I'm DC Puba of Cuke Audio and Cuke Archives, preserving the legacy of Shunryu Suzuki and those whose paths crossed his, and anything else that comes to mind. I pray that you and yours are safe and comfortable, free from economic hardship, and able to get out and do whatever it is you want within the limitations of the universal precept of do as little harm as possible. So today we have someone whose paths cross Shunryu Suzuki's, Pat McMahon. He's one of the Reed crowd, Reed College in Oregon, which made a significant dent in Zen Center. So you'll hear plenty about him and what he's up to now, what he was up to back then. I wanted to say one thing, though. There's correspondence going on between Reed people, and I'm fortunate to get CCs of those. And sometimes when I'm forgotten, somebody will forward one to me. But one thing came up. Somebody had found in an old Reed calendar or something, it said Shunryu Suzuki was scheduled to come in 1968 or something. He went there in 71 and he got sick and had to fly back. He gave one talk the night before and went to Zazen the next morning, and then he went back and had his gallbladder removed. But nobody had any memory of that happening. I said nobody had ever mentioned it to me, so I found it not true. Also, his name was misspelled in it, so it wasn't clear if it was him. And we know that Sasaki went up there, Joshu Sasaki, so I thought, well, maybe that was him. But then Pat McMahon remembered Richard Baker coming and speaking in Shunryu Suzuki's stead. Hey, incidentally, I got a hold of Richard Baker and asked him about it. He said his memory was really good for some things and not for others. He said, well, yeah, I went up there once and, they had some press people there. So I don't remember what he said. He said, I just left. Well, that's not what Pat says. Pat said he gave a talk in the evening, and the next morning they had Zazen, and that Richard Baker gave Zazen instruction. And this is before Pat had come to Zen Center or met Suzuki, and he said that he has practiced Zazen every morning since that Zazen instruction he got from Richard Baker way back then. So I just wanted to add that. I thought that was really good. Oh, there's other stuff from Pat on, on Cuke.com. There is on many of these people we do a podcast with. If you just go to Cuke.com, Cuke.com, and write the person's name or a part of it in the site search box on the homepage, and it's on a bunch of other pages too, our special pages, then it'll come up. Something will come up, their Cuke page, their interview, or whatever. So, all right. So after we've had our pause to meditate, let's give Pat McMahon a call and see what he has to say. So, when you hear the bell, if you're of such a mind, hit pause and meditate or whatever for as long as you wish. And when you're ready to come back, and when you're ready to cease the meditation or whatever, you can hit unpause, and we'll be there to hit the bell to end the meditation or whatever. And we'll give Pat McMahon a call.
Hey, David.
Hi there. How are you doing, Pat?
I'm fine. I'm home. Actually, I was checking into the podcast with Len Brackett.
Ha ha ha. Yeah.
Yeah. Good to hear his voice.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. His relationship with his goshawk, with his experience in Japan with, not only carpentry, but Zen. Very impressive. I had no idea.
Mm.
Yeah.
I actually studied with the man who sponsored him while he was in Japan. Actually connected him with the Temple carpentry outfit.
You did?
Yeah, man named Shunryu, Kabori Roshi.
Mm-hmm.
Little temple there in Kyoto. Gary Snyder had gone and made acquaintance with Roshi, and Roshi sponsored him, and then through Gary, Len got connected with Kabori, and then it's a story. I got connected with Kabori through Aiken Roshi.
When you say through Roshi, you've got to use a family name or something. I'm not sure.
Robert Aiken.
Huh?
Robert Aiken. Oh, are we talking? You're wanting me to use Kabori's?
Well,
name?
yeah. I mean, you were just saying Roshi. I didn't know who you were referring to.
Yeah, Kabori Roshi.
Right.
Yeah, right. Lots of Roshis, and then Robert Aiken Roshi connected me with Kabori.
Oh, goodness.
More surprises.
I had no idea. Well, hey.
Yeah.
So, you've got a business called Rocksolid Gardening. What is it?
Yeah, Rocksolid Gardens.
I want to hear about it.
Okay, well, it's on my mind. I was listening to maybe partly just association with the podcast with Len, where he was talking about not particularly enjoying the business, but, just really loving the work. Mm-hmm. And apparently he's got things set up so he can mainly work and call his shots as far as hours and so forth. And I guess he's got somebody managing the business. In my case, it goes back, David, actually to Suzuki Roshi. When I went down from Portland to study with this Zen master, I went to Suzuki Roshi and said, I want to study rock gardening with you because that's what I'd heard about him. And he said, well, why don't we start with Zazen? So that stopped me dead in my tracks. I figured, oh, well, okay. But, David, over time, I did my, I did the Zazen. I was around the rocks at Tassajara. I even was on a trail crew with Rick Levine.
Mm-hmm.
And he famously told the alumni, famous to us, the alumni newsletter at Reed, that he was involved with the cult in deep in the mountains, deep in the canyon in Big Sur, with Patrick McMahon sorting rocks as to small, middle, and large.
Yes. Yes, I'm aware of that. I like that. I like that little post he did in the newsletter.
Yeah, I guess it made it in there. Well, it was refreshing because, so many of those reportings especially when you're fresh out of college, are going to, be make the reader think you're pretty hot.
Right, right, right,
Well, we were pretty hot by studying Zen. That was the hot
right.
thing. But you're asking about my business. So, I knocked around, met you and many other people at Zen Center and did my Zazen. And then one thing led to another, and I started a gardening business. And I noticed that I was returning to rock. It's pretty fundamental to me. I was drawn to rock when I was a kid. So I decided, let's identify with it and identify myself with it professionally. Rocksolid came from that. And it's the main thing I do. And in fact, today I'm involved, the last 5 weeks, I've been involved in a project involving a lot of stone, a lot of flagstone. And it's all, the crux of this whole project is coming to the placement of a Kuan Yin, a heavy piece of stone herself, actually concrete. So it's like the job itself, and it feels like where my career with rocks and Zen as well kind of has converged in this one place where I'm basically, with my helper, I moved this, pretty hefty Kuan Yin. She stands maybe 4 feet tall and weighs maybe 200 pounds. We moved her into a location that I very carefully prepared for her, set her up, made a nice water feature, a pond for her to gaze into, and began to set up little altars. So that's what I do, David. That's rock solid for you. It's just beautiful. It feels like just about the time that I thought, like Len, he called it the indignities of age, just about when I thought, Patrick, you're a crumbling rock. Then this job comes along, and it's just crazy. It happens to be an old a Reed friend.
Yeah.
After 50 years. So go figure. It all kind of keeps coming together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, indeed. More than 50 years, actually.
Yeah, more than 50 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, 60. Yeah.
50. Well, were you first down there in, say, 70?
Let's see. How does it work? When I met this gal, my customer, it was in 60, 68, 69. And then I spent I spent my time with the Zen houses there. And then I went up to Vancouver for a year. And then I got the imperious call to come down and study at San Francisco with Suzuki Roshi. I'd already met him. He came up to Portland. You'll notice.
Right.
It's the history now. So I met him up there. I met Richard Baker up there. Then it was time to come down. And that would have been like 71 or when did Suzuki Roshi die? It was that
December of 71.
Yeah, well, I came down in the summer of 71.
Well, that was a good summer.
Mm-hmm.
That was a good summer. He gave a lot of talks and did a lot of work in his garden. You were there for that. That's good.
And you as well.
Yes, yeah. I was the assistant director, or maybe I was the work leader, and then in the fall I was the assistant director. I don't know. It was all sort of the same. Well, how far back would you trace this your bodhicitta, your desire for enlightenment, your sense that there's something to learn that's not being taught in the regular curriculum, sort of thing.
Yeah. Well, David, that's a very interesting question. I don't think I've ever been asked it quite that way, but I've thought about it. And it goes back to, must have been, maybe 13 or 14 years old. And I remember distinctly, I was standing looking at some telephone wires. And all of a sudden, what is this? That question came up. It was so crazy to think that anything at all existed.
Right.
And right. Okay.
Right.
Right. And that was a question I never really mentioned that experience to anybody. Well, maybe I'm mentioning it for one of the first or second or third times to you, but it was that little blip, that little blip. And then now we fast forward a bit to more of a conscious, more of a connection with, maybe Buddhism or Zen, can help me along with that experience.
Well, when did you think maybe Buddhism or Zen can help me, with that? At what point did you think that?
Yeah. Well, I had some hints, it was in the air, Alan Watts, mainly, and read Watts, but it made sense, philosophically, and I was pretty philosophic at the time, and that would have been, that might have been high school.
Uh-huh.
Might have been in high school. Yeah. And then I got, into, then I go to read, and I meet Lloyd Reynolds.
Right.
Lloyd really was an irritant to me. I remember almost the first class we had with him, his first talk, he said, "Don't think." I hated that. Don't think. I was there to think, man. And so I remember going out of that class just in virulent argument with one of my fellow students. But it began to sink in.
Why don't you tell us what Lloyd Reynolds was teaching?
Well, ostensibly he was teaching art history. That was my meeting with him. But he was sneaking all kinds of stuff into his art history class that a good deal that I never heard before, which is Eastern thought. Mm-hmm. And then where he really hooked many of us, as you know, was with calligraphy.
Right.
That was it. That was my first experience of a practice that you could do. I mean, it's very, very straightforward. You practice calligraphy. But the way he explained it made it clear we're not just practicing calligraphy. We're kind of, we're involving the whole self, I suppose would be one way to put it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so I did that. And it was my first physical practice. You could do it, and you could do it over and over. And the more you did it over and over, kind of the more you sunk into it.
Mm.
And the more you sunk into it, the more you sunk, I suppose, into yourself. And then other things began to bubble and burble, and then this history, I think you'll know it, so I can run across it pretty quickly. Lloyd was quite an influence on Gary Snyder, Philip Whalen, but then my peers, Len Brackett, Rick Levine, big time influence. And then when we formed the Zen House, the second one, there was one just up from campus. We call it the Cosmos. That's the one that what Len was mentioning.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next one was the next year was with another part of town. Was with Layla now Bockhorst, and Rick, and a few other people. That then converged on Zen Center. That I think it would probably the summer of '69. Several of them came down. Anyway, he became quite interested in what we were doing with the Zen House, and we started up a little loom making studio and so forth. And people went to him. I think Rick famously, or famous with us, went to Lloyd with a few of our people and said, "What do you think that this is? We could have the courage of our conviction somehow. This seems really important." And I think Rick reports, he said, "Hell's bells, man, go for it," basically. And with that encouragement, I don't think there were too many other faculty that were encouraging us or even knew about it, but Lloyd did. Lloyd furthered us.
He encouraged what?
He encouraged, well, in this particular project was, first of all, incorporating as a little Zen Center.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I kind of didn't know it either. But Rick says that's what they did. That's what we did.
Huh.
And also this project of making, handicraft, making looms.
Wow.
And Lloyd was all about that. Lloyd was, kind of he was at the ilk of, who was that guy back in the 19th century? Morris, putting together the arts with the manual, so-called fine arts with the manual arts.
I'm sorry. You've got to tell me.
Yeah, well, I'm searching around for his. He was a major. I mean, this is kind of a diversion from what we're saying. Let's just say that Lloyd.
Hey, if you think of that name, let me know, and I'll stick it back in here.
Yeah, it'll come to me. Okay, it'll come to me.
It's not William Blake.
Set it on.
It's not William Blake.
No. It's not William Blake. You might say it'll come to me, David. He was an architect. He started a whole movement of integrating handicrafts with architecture, with
Steiner,
reading, with thinking. No. This. Okay, you know how it is. Tip of the tongue kind of thing.
What year are you thinking?
This would have been the turn of the century.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I might not know the name.
Yeah. You might not.
Yeah.
You might not, but Lloyd would have. Lloyd would have known it. It was following in that tradition. So, yeah, very tight connection there. Calligraphy, Zen, and handicrafts and poetry, all coming through Lloyd.
He quit the university around that time, too.
Well, there's ways to tell that story. Rick could tell the story and has told the story. In John Sheehy's collected voices of the oral history of Reed College.
Right.
Right. Okay, so Sheehy has got some of that. Lloyd was kind of forced out. This is back Black Student Union. days in '69, and Lloyd took the side of the students, and the faculty didn't like it. So as Rick tells the story, basically they went to him, the heavies, and said, look, we took your side during the communist years, and now you need to align with us. And I think Lloyd just knew he couldn't do that. So you might say he quit, you might say he was forced out.
Now, what were you saying there? Took site during the communist years. What are you talking about?
Okay. Well, we got to back up and do a little explanation here. Lloyd, during the McCarthy era, if he wasn't a card-carrying communist, he was very clear with his sympathies, and he was called before the committee there
before the McCarthy Senate committee.
Yeah, I believe so.
There was that, and there on the House side, there was the House Un-American Activities Committee.
Yeah, I don't know. I know I don't know the particulars of that. The history is known. Anyway, Reed came to his defense, and Lloyd squeaked through, continued doing what he did. William Morris is the name of the guy that I'm talking about. William Morris, the architect.
Oh, right, right.
Renaissance man.
I'm only familiar with the name. Yeah.
So we got that.
Very good.
Funny how that happens.
Yeah. So let's go back to high school. So you go from high school to Reed, and then from Reed to the Zen Center. So you first came to Tassajara to grade rocks, small, medium, and large.
Yes.
I
didn't know that.
In maybe that was 69, 70?
It was the summer of '69.
Right.
Yeah. And then I went up to Vancouver and came down the summer of '71. Yeah, that's how that goes.
Yeah. And do you have any particular memories of Suzuki Roshi?
But let's go back to high school.
Okay, do that.
Because it just prompted me to think there were some stirrings. My friends call me Buddha Boy. Why they would have done that? Short of that, I had very short hair. I don't know, but they call me Buddha Boy. And I had a teacher, my junior year English teacher. He identified himself as I might as well call myself a Buddhist, he said. He wasn't of the cut from the cloth of a regular guy English teacher. Hearing it from him, he was the first person, maybe tongue of cheek, said that he was a Buddhist. Okay. Well, okay. So those two things. Now I can move on to, where are we now?
Oh, well, you went to Reed, and then you came to Tassajara in the summer of '71. I said, do you remember first seeing Suzuki, meeting him, any impressions there?
Yeah. Okay, to set the record straight, I came down in the summer of '69, and then I went back up, lived with the folks, Rick and Layla and so forth. Lived up there the following year, went to Vancouver, Washington, did a job there, came down in the summer of '71. So, but the main thing is you're asking me about Suzuki Roshi.
Okay, wait a minute. Were you at Reed when Suzuki went there in February of '71?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was. So there was a session in February of 71. I was in Vancouver at the time. And I wasn't paying too much attention, but my friends told me, Suzuki Roshi's coming up. This is your big chance. Come and sit with us. So I did. And Suzuki was there. Reb was there. Reb was kind of his, looking after him and second in command kind of thing. He was there in the morning, but he kind of disappeared late in the morning. And then at work meeting that afternoon, somebody said, the work leader said, Suzuki Roshi is not feeling well. Does anybody know how to give massage? Well, my hand went straight up. I didn't really know so much, except for the normal hands. Our hands were all over each other at that time. So I got to give Roshi a massage. And he's lying there on the table in his robe, and he instructs me in how to give a back massage. I still remember, they said there's muscles on either side of the spine, so just work your thumbs up and down the spine. And I did that. So I had a living Zen master under my hands. That was a thrill. Mm. But then I guess that wasn't the first that I'd met him, David. I met him the summer of '69 when I came down for the guest period. Mm-hmm. And at that time, he and I found ourselves in the hot baths at a kind of an off time. I think I was working in the kitchen. Nobody else was in the baths, and I saw, his little bald head floating over there in the water. And I got in the water, and I kind of floated over in that direction. And he looked at me, and he looked at my head, and he pointed at my head. And whatever he said, I wasn't understanding. But I thought, he's pointing to my head above my head kind of thing. It had to be significant, Then I realized he was pointing at a spot on my head that I had missed when I was shaving my head. Oh. That was a significant encounter. And it was really significant. It really was.
So you came down in '69 from Reed and shaved your head at Tassajara.
That's right. That's right.
Did Rick?
I was going to do it right, David.
Did Rick shave his head?
Not everybody was shaving their head. You were there. I don't know if Rick shaved his head.
Well, usually guest students didn't. I mean, people coming down for a brief period didn't.
I know. But I had to make a statement. I'm the real thing.
Oh, that's cool.
Of course, it was cool, but I really couldn't decently shave my own head.
Well, nice
and he
try.
Was pointing that out with there's no mirrors, there's nothing. But he got a lot of amusement out of that. There were other meetings, not a lot. So I came down to Zen Center to study with him in '71. By that time, he was beginning to, disappear from us a bit. But I did talk with him about what should I study. I went in and had a little interview in his office. What should I study, Roshi?
Wait a minute, in his office? You mean in the city?
Right. I was at the city center. I think we're talking now '71, the fall of '71.
Oh, no. He wasn't talking to anybody in the fall of '71.
Well, then when was I talking to him? It must have been.
He was. I shouldn't say he wasn't talking to anybody. He wasn't meeting with students then. I'd say after the end, after he came back from Tassajara in late August of 71, I don't think he met with new students anymore. He wasn't feeling well. He gave one talk, and after that, it was just like people who were very close with him, and and he went downhill and died.
Yeah.
So anyway, you saw him before then, there in the city.
I saw. Go ahead, David.
No, I said you saw him before then there in the city.
Yeah.
So tell about that.
Yeah. Well, I came down, to the city center, the summer of '69, and the deal was.
Oh, you're talking about '69 now.
Yeah,
in the
going
office.
back to '69.
Oh, well, you're talking about Sokoji then.
Yeah, Sokoji.
Oh, okay.
So Sokoji. So when I came down, the deal was I wanted to go to Tassajara, but you had to go to Sokoji to do the city schedule, such as it was, first for a certain period of time. And during that, it must have been during that time that I went and talked with Roshi. It was my first interview with him, and I asked him what should I be studying, and he recommended D.T. Suzuki.
No.
Yes.
Shocking.
Second series. Yeah. sounds natural. I did not take to D.T. Suzuki. Wasn't what I was looking for in Zen literature. So that was a recommendation, but I didn't follow through.
Huh.
Then I went down to Tassajara.
Yeah, that's so unusual.
Then he was.
Wow.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, maybe he knew I was pretty, who knows, David, pretty heady guy. Maybe he thought D.T. Suzuki would give my head something to busy itself about.
That's interesting. So?
Well, so you know what I did? I got the Zen teaching of Huang Po.
Oh, well, that's great. Yeah.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
And I read that thing over and over and over.
Yeah.
All sages and all beings are sentient beings are nothing but the one mind besides which nothing exists. So that was my koan. I hardly needed to read beyond that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I didn't understand it at all. So that was my study.
I've never moved beyond that. I just loved Wang Po.
Well, good. Stay with it.
Yeah.
I never moved beyond the first line, frankly.
Yeah, Wang Po said, well, sort of like, I don't remember how it was worded in the book. John Blofield did it. He said something like, it was like, how do you get enlightened? I don't remember how he worded it. He said, stand when you're standing, sit when you're sitting, lie when you're lying down, and just do that. It should take about 10 years. I swear it said something like that.
Well, there's the other thing, David. I was thinking, your questions are good, but I was there on the beach. Well, here's the background to today. I went out to the beach. Seemed like the beach there on the bay, just east of Mount Tim, just west of the freeway. There's the mud flats there, and I found a nice warm place to sit. And I sat there for a couple of hours, which is my practice before a talk with my teacher, Nelson Foster. I sit for a couple of hours, and then I'm set up, for the dokuphon, we call it. So I did that. And during that time, I had many, many thoughts, but this one kept coming up for me, is one surprise after another. As a description of my Zen life, my particular Zen life, and I don't think it's so particular. I think it would be one way that you'll understand what I mean. I think one surprise after another. It does not proceed according to the way you thought it would or should or whatever.
Right. Well, look, that's that was your thought, but Suzuki, and that's right down the Suzuki alley, saying that. Oh yeah, definitely.
The big surprise, and here's what I was prepared for, because I talked with you in my own inner chamber, and I heard you ask this question: what was the biggest surprise?
Yeah.
And I had various answers to that, but the biggest surprise I would say right now is that 10 years is nothing. 10 years is nothing. It turns out the big surprise is you never get there. There's no, you never get there. I think, it's 50 years for you, more for you, 50 years plus for me. I remember when I thought a year. I remember talking with Yvonne when I came down to the Sokoji, and she asked me, well, how long have you been practicing? I said, a year. She kind of smiled. I thought that was a long time. Now, do I think it's a long time now? Well, yeah, it's a long time. But here's the real surprise, David, is kind of, in a way, nothing has changed. The fundamental practice of Zazen is absolutely unchanged. How could you change it? Drop in, year after year. What's its character? Water. It's just plain as water. That's a big surprise.
Yeah, I can relate to that. That's well said.
Many other surprises, but I would say that's the big one. Big. What's big mean? What's little mean? The big surprise could be as little as I'm sitting there on the beach and the tide comes in. Things begin to disappear that I had seen before. I begin to hear the water lapping as it gets closer. God, what could be more surprising than that? Everything disappears that I've been looking at before. Something comes close to me, and then it begins to go out again. Total surprise.
Yeah.
What's the big surprise been for you? Or has there been one?
Talking to you right now.
Right. Exactly. Isn't it crazy? Isn't it absolutely crazy?
Yeah.
David, let me tell you something that's very personal here. Part of the big surprise is that we're having the conversation at all. And I'll be frank with it. Right up into this very point, I had thought of you. You were, a couple of years ahead of me. I thought of you and that whole generation a couple of years ahead of me as outrageously more advanced than me. Right. I mean, you guys, you were the heroes, and I was just a little, just a little novice. Here's the memory, though, and I wonder if you remember it. What kind of took that idea apart in relation to you was you were the work leader. We're talking now 71, I believe. You were the work leader at the City Center.
72.
72. Okay, 72. You were the work leader, and you had taken upon yourself a vow of silence.
Richard Baker had taken it upon me.
Okay, he'd taken it upon you. Anyway, you went silent, which was quite a big deal because you're a pretty talky guy. At that time, you were very talky, and you right?
Yeah,
very vocal, and we all enjoyed it. You were a good vocalist, but you went silent. Yeah, very funny. You went silent, and you communicated at work meeting with notes and hand signals and so forth. That all would, really worked. One night, and here's the crux of it. One night, it was a Saturday night. It was an off day night, an off night. I am absolutely at loose ends. If I was following the schedule, I was okay. But the moment there was free choice about what to do, I was unable really to handle that. So I'm wandering in the halls, just really what to do with myself. Everybody seems to be gone. They're all having fun. They're all going to movies and so forth in my mind. And you're in the hall. And you see me, and you gesture to me to come into your room. And we go to your room, and you get your guitar out. And you start singing to me.
Yep.
Do you remember that?
Well, I did that all the time. You see, I got permission from Baker to sing, but not to sing to communicate, to sing songs.
Right.
And I wrote like 50 songs that during that 6-month period. That was 6 months. Incidentally, nobody called it a vow of silence. They said it was the noisiest vow of silence they ever heard. I think all we could say, it was a period of no words, no spoken words.
Yeah.
And, but, yeah, I really, that, I had written songs, since I was in elementary school now and then, but I really, but mainly I had been improvising for years. And I would improvise, all these songs would come out. And then in 72, I thought, as soon as they're out, I forget them. And there have been some amazing things go by. I'm going to stop improvising. And I started writing them down and recording them. And I still do it. And I'm over 1,100 songs now.
And you can remember them because you wrote them down.
Well, also I recorded them.
And you recorded them.
Yeah. And I used to look for people that I could trap and play a song to.
And you did that with me. But the way I felt about it, David, you had your own agenda with that. That's cool. But the way that it affected me was somebody cares about me. Somebody makes, even if I was an audience, still, you kind of saved me in that moment.
Oh.
You really saved me.
Good.
I don't know what the song was, but just, it's something like, again, surprise. I was abandoned to this, this notion of being lonely, this notion of being at loose ends. What happens? Something totally out of the blue. Somebody invites you into their room and sings a song. How surprising.
Well, I always regard, I sort of regard my whole life and what I've done and created and everything that's flowing out of it as just something that I don't feel like I'm doing it.
Mm.
You know what I mean? I feel like
Mm-hmm.
I feel like everything is. It's sort of like Caruso, the great opera singer. I am not comparing
Mm.
myself to him. I don't
Mm.
have that good a
Mm.
voice. Or I'm
Mm.
not saying anything is high quality, but he said
Mm.
he said it all comes from God, right?
Mm.
His voice comes from God.
Mm.
So I don't
Mm.
see things in terms of celestial beings
Mm.
like that, or in terms of being, but I just feel like things are just coming through me, and
Mm.
I and so I sort of feel like a vessel, or
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
I don't
Mm-hmm.
feel that's unique with me either.
Mm. Mm.
You know, a Christian
Well,
said to me, "Do you believe I'm fundamentalist?" Yeah, he said,
mm.
he said, "Do you believe that God wrote the Bible?" Which idiotic idea that
Mm.
has
Mm.
no. Well, I mean, where's the origin of that? Certainly not from the Bible. But I said, "Oh, yeah, I believe that. I believe God wrote everything,
Mm.
including the phone book."
It's true. If you say he wrote the Bible, he's going to write the phone book too.
Right.
Uh-huh.
Well,
Well, here's the thing about it,
yeah,
David. Let me say this: if you're a vessel, you don't know where your song is going to go. You don't know where it came from. You don't know where it's going to go.
right.
So I doubt if you knew where that song went with me. But I'm telling you now where it went.
Yeah,
It went towards a little moment there where I didn't have to feel quite so desperate.
yeah, yeah,
And there were more moments to come, and there was more desperation to come. But these little moments where people would surprise me, they keep happening. They never stopped. The disconsolation is not as extreme as it was, but we all have those moments. Somebody always comes along. It could be a child, it could be a dog, it could be a neighbor, it could be the barista, and there's just some little glint or some little something. Oh, save my ass again.
yeah, yeah. Well, you have to be
They don't know it.
receptive to it for it to happen, I think. So you allowed it to happen. You didn't get in the way of it.
Well, what a tragedy it would be to do that.
Well, existence is filled with constant tragedies.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
That's what sin is in Christian history. It's tragic errors.
Mm. Sin. Yeah. Tragic errors. Tragedy.
They can be very small, little tiny tragic errors.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, listen, I experience that every day.
Yeah.
Every day. And then the trick is, and of course, I got my teeth cut on that at Zen Center. One mistake after another, as Suzuki said. But now it's just a matter of how quickly you can see it and how quickly you can come back and redress it. It's something I've learned.
Right.
Something I've learned.
Right.
Thank God. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. We're going to do it different now. That kind of thing. Yes, I know that now.
Mm. Mm.
Thank God.
Mm.
I don't know if that has. There's so much about this, David. You don't know how much of it is the Zen training, and how much of it is just getting older. You don't. It's just how can you tease it out?
Yeah.
Hmm.
Indeed. When How long were you around? I mean, you continued practicing at Zen Center after Suzuki died. How long were you around?
Hmm. I went down after he died. I went for that training period at Tassajara, the winter training period. I went down in January, February, whatever it was. Um, and I absolutely fell apart there. Um, fell apart. It was just the most miserable time of my life. And I bombed out. I was intending to go back, but everything at the interim, I went home and I could not get myself to go back. And I called Mel up and said, I cannot come back. I didn't say it would be the death of me, but I did say I just can't come back. So then I went off on I went home. I went back to my hometown, Davis, and started trying took up regular life. I got a job, I got a girlfriend, and so forth.
Huh.
Yeah, that's what I needed to do.
Huh. I wouldn't. I mean, I can't say I wasn't aware of that then. I'm not aware. I wasn't aware of that now. I have. I mean, I remember you so well, more like somebody who'd been around for years and years. What, didn't you stay in touch or something?
Oh yeah. What happened was I went back to home, Davis, and you can't go home again. So I continued to I continued to break down. Had a really nasty food disorder, symptom of something, and I knew I'm going to die out here. I've got to go back to the family, even though I was miserable there. So I called up Richard Baker. I called up Baker Roshi and said, "Look, I got to come home. Well, where's home? I'm coming." And he said, "Well, come to Green Gulch. We'll find something for you to do." Yeah, bless his heart. And so I went to Green Gulch.
What year? What year was this?
This would have been, so I'm 72, 73, maybe 74. Maybe 74. I'm not great with calendar, but let's just say I went to Green Gulch. I stayed there for sometime more than a year.
Yeah.
And then I went running from Green Gulch because I was just so miserable. And then I tried living as a quote normal person again. And it took a little bit more. I began to get a little bit more ground underneath my feet. But then, God, I just really wasn't ready to stand on my own. So at this point, I called up Mel in Berkeley and said, "Mel, I'm coming. I gotta come back." And he said what Baker said, which we'll find a place for you. So that's when it really began to make a swing up. And then I spent quite a long time at the Berkeley Zen Center.
Yeah.
Maybe quite a long time. And then, okay, the rest is history. I met Aiken Roshi. I met Nelson. I knew that was the way I needed to go, and so forth.
Nelson Foster, right. So
yeah,
did you go to Hawaii? What?
No, I didn't. Aiken was coming to Ring of Bone.
And so was Nelson already there?
He was starting. He was several of these sessions, most of the sessions, Nelson was his attendant. 1 year, John Tarrant was the attendant, but mostly it was Nelson. And Nelson and I really connected not just about Zen, but around the Buddhist Peace Fellowship.
Mm-hmm.
So Nelson and I got close around Buddhist Peace Fellowship. Aiken stopped coming at a certain point. Nelson took over. And that would have been what? That would have been 86. That's when I really began to study with Nelson. And Ring-a-Bone is my present, it's my temple.
Oh, is that right? Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Nevada City.
Yep.
Do you
Yep.
ever
Have
see
you been
Gary
there?
Snyder when you go there?
I do. I made a point for some years of going, the Zendo's just down the hill from Gary's place. I go up during the Rohatsu. It's called the working person session. And I would go up to Gary's place to do some work. We had some really nice times. The last time I did that was maybe, I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago.
Huh.
I don't think I've seen much of him for at least the last year or two. But I hear his generator.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. So now, David's coming up to the present. I'm mainly practicing on my own.
Yeah.
But I have Dokaphone with Nelson once a week, and I go up for a session maybe 3 or 4 times a year and do the mountain rivers and so forth. They're my people.
Mm-hmm. Ah. Wow. Well, that is very interesting. I didn't know all this. I wasn't aware of your problems, your anguish, when you were at Zen Center. And I think one reason is you're quiet. You don't go around broadcasting stuff.
I was hiding.
Oh, you said that's hiding?
What's that?
Did you say that's hiding?
No, I said I was hiding.
You said you were hiding.
I was hiding. I was so shy and so ashamed. The food disorder was really disturbing. And the food disorder was symptomatic, and let's not go into that. Let's just say that Zen at that point was good at demolishing me, but it wasn't good at putting me back together. I had to go away in order to do that.
Yeah. Well, that's part of the tradition too,
Is it?
Oh, sure. There's no one. There's no one correct template. Yeah.
Fortunately.
Yeah, I think you've followed you've followed the course that worked for you.
You mean I did it right, David?
Well, absolutely. Right. Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah. Indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed. Well, go on.
It's awfully nice getting the confirmation, though. I know it for myself. I don't hide much these days. There's nothing I'm particularly ashamed of. I mean, it's all just as much as possible. It's out there for all to see. But that period of my life at Zen Center, it's still, there's a pang there. There's an ache there. And the ache is that if I have some regret, it's that I didn't open up. I didn't show anybody. I acted as though you didn't know. Very few people knew. Baker knew.
Yeah. I've never been sensitive to other people's problems. I was mainly unaware of them. Sometimes, but I can't tell you how many times I've had people tell me things like you told me with the song, but I quite frequently when they tell me that, I was completely unaware I was doing anything nice for them.
Good.
I was just, being friendly or whatever. Yeah, well, I think our problems, our mistakes, are really an essential part of us, our path in a positive sense. I mean,
Mm,
boy, I can look at, you know, failures and errors and mistakes and think, God, if I hadn't have done it wrong, I would have been stuck
mm,
there, or I can see it as a
mm,
necessary part of what happened next.
hmm.
But I also don't believe in overinterpreting it. Mainly, I think forgetting.
Mm,
I like
hmm.
your Wang Po comment. Would you repeat
Mm.
that? Do you remember the essence?
All sages and all sentient beings, I'm doing it word for word as far as Blofeld um, translated. All sages and all sentient beings are nothing but the one mind beside which nothing exists.
I read that, or I hear you say that, and that I just, it's like the greatest relief. It's just,
Mm.
mm,
It's so plain then. It's so absolutely plain. Nothing exists except for this one mind. And what is it?
yeah,
But don't try to interpret it. I was when I was sitting one mind when I was sitting there at the beach.
yeah,
I heard I was just zazen, whatever happens in zazen, thoughts and so forth. Um, and when I heard the water lapping, when it became audible because the water was getting near me, I needed to take a piss.
right,
One mind.
yeah, yeah,
It's that straightforward. It's that simple,
right, right,
intimate.
right. What's your take on climate change and the fate of the Earth now?
David, are you going to throw me that one? Here's the best I can do. Um, I pay attention to the garden that I'm making.
Yeah,
I give it my best shot at really making a beautiful, it's like you with your song. I'm a conduit. I happen to it flows through me in when I'm working in the garden, when I'm working with stone, when I'm working with water, in a very fluid, solid way. Uh, I hardly think at all. I don't think about particularly doing this for my clients, doing it for Kuan Yin. It's just I'm just totally doing it. If I stand back though and reflect on, well, what's the significance of this? What am I doing? Especially when you ask the question, I think this is the best I can do. I'm creating an environment, helping an environment which is already lush. It's not like I'm going into a desert. It's it's lush. It's thriving, and it's right on the edge of badass East Oakland. So there I am. I'm creating something. I'm giving it my what I can do to make it basically accessible
mm-hmm.
because it was just a jungle. And I've set up the Kuan Yin, and she's there doing what Kuan Yin does. You know, she's listening, and part of what's going on there is the sound of the water.
Mm.
Just a gentle water. What's going on 25 yards away is um, sideshows. Sideshows are where, you know, 50 or 100 cars will get together and they'll do a rodeo, so to speak, and blaring motorcycle radios and such. It's quite a mix
Yeah.
of, and I feel like that is my work. If I'm dedicated to something, make a sanctuary, set Kuan Yin up where the cries of the world are not subtle.
Yeah.
They're
Right.
deafening
Right.
in their loudness, and she's just there. She's just, she's listening like she always does. That's what I do. In answer to your question, that's my best way to address the situation of the planet, the war, Ukraine and Russia. What else do I know how to do?
Yeah. Where do you live? Where do you live now?
I live in Berkeley. I live just south of campus, about a 20-minute walk.
Huh.
Very pleasant neighborhood, just down from Telegraph.
Ah.
Do you know Rob Lyons, by the way?
Rob
Lyons.
Lyons?
Yes. Rob is the manager of this kind of communal house where I'm living, and he's become, well, he's been studying and practicing and being a leader through the Berkeley Zendo.
Oh, that's where I know that name. That's where yeah.
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 And right now he's at Tassajara with the work period.
Yeah.
So he put together this house that I feel like next to living at a Zen Center, this is it. This is it. There's no conspicuous Zen here. But it feels like it. It just really feels like, okay, this is where I should be. This is my practice place. I don't know that it has any influence on anybody, but I'm there to be influenced by everybody. And Rob and I have a Dharma brother relationship. It's very cool.
That's nice. That's really good. Wow.
How things turn out.
Indeed. Well, I think this brings us full circle here.
Yes.
Do you have anything? This has been most enjoyable and enlightening. Here, everything you have had to say. Do you have anything you'd like to tie it up with?
Let's go back to the beach. Let's go back to the beach where I was, where I started. At around 5 o'clock. Sat there when I first went. It's mud flats, the sandpipers. The water comes in. 7 o'clock comes, and I don't hear from you. That's the same. Is that not the same ocean that laps the beaches where you are?
Well, it certainly is. It's at a different height.
Yeah. Well, it's a different height, but it's the water.
Yeah.
And I think that's why I went there. What did I know except that most of my practice these days is outside, a beach, a park, whatever. That's where I really like to practice. I thought, where do I want to talk with David? I want to talk with David at the beach. Well, there's that ocean. And here we are talking, as things happen, I'm in my little room here on Prince Street. And you are where?
In Sanur, in Bali.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and here we are.
Yeah, and I'm right near the beach, And I think the high tide today will be about 6:30 in the evening, and I like to swim as much as I can. I like to try to get at least 2 times a week in, so I'm gonna go down there later in the day, I think, and have a swim. And just my idea now, I just walk down there, swim, and walk right back. Katrinka's already been, but she might want to come with me. We'll see.
I'll go there with you. I'll go with you.
Yeah,
Go with you.
yeah.
Okay?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
This has been wonderful for me, too. Let's just say one surprise after another.
Yeah.
One surprise after another.
Indeed. 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 Well said. Well said. And definitely dead center with Suzuki Roshi's teaching.
What a surprise.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Okay. Take care. Thanks a lot. It's been great.
Oh, thank you, David. Thanks, friend.
All right.
Have a good swim.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
This has been a Cuke Audio podcast. I'm DC Puba of Cuke Audio and Cuke Archives, coming to you from sleepy Sonora with Doggy Bandita, Feline Cuchita, and dear lovely Katrinka. And we're wishing you and yours and all of us a grand awakening.